Death Stranding has been one of the most anticipated games I've wanted to get my hands on since it was first revealed all the way back at E3 2016. Coming from the mind of my favorite game creator of all time, Hideo Kojima, who's responsible for creating my favorite video game franchise of all time, after the mess that happened with the whole Konami situation, I've been really looking forward to see what Kojima could do on his own moving on from the Metal Gear Solid series. And after 3 years of waiting and several creative trailers later, Death Stranding is finally here. And while it wasn't exactly the game I was expecting, it was still without question one of the most unique gaming experiences that I've experienced during this current generation of gaming. Now, the main story for Death Stranding is really complex and complicated to explain, even when trying to come up with a quick summary of it. But without going into any spoilers that haven't already been revealed in the trailers, Death Stranding takes place in a somewhat post-apocalyptic United States in which the majority of humanity has been wiped out after a cataclysmic event called the Death Stranding. After this event, the appearance of what are called BTs, which are spirits of the fallen that have been trapped in the world of the living and are extremely dangerous, cause the final remains of humanity to retreat into small groups and become isolated, cut off from each other. You will take control of Sam Porter Bridges, who travels from location to location delivering cargo to anyone who he's willing to work for. After being caught in what is called a void out that occurs when someone dies, Sam finds himself in the main base of the company known as Bridges, who wishes to reconnect the remnants of humanity throughout the United States. Sam at first declines, but after hearing that his adoptive mother is dying and his supposed stepsister Amelie is in trouble on the opposite side of the country, Sam agrees to help Bridges by traveling across the country, delivering cargo and connecting individuals and pockets of humanity to what is called the Chiral network. To help Sam on his way, he is given what is called a bridge baby, or BB, that allows Sam the ability to see BTs. This way he can avoid them, or later on can successfully engage them. But BTs are not the only threat that Sam has to encounter, as he will have to confront a man named Higgs, who is the leader of a military separatist group called the Homo Demons, who does not want to see humanity reconnected, but instead wishes the extinction of humanity, and somehow has the power to call and summon extremely powerful BTs to do his work for him. Now that, in my opinion, is the best way that I can quickly explain what this game is about without spoilers, because Death Stranding is an extremely complex game to understand, and it would be very confusing for those who are not familiar with Hideo Kojima's style of storytelling, and you may have problems getting through this game's plot, because there are so many characters, and there's so many things going on at the same time, and there's so much backstory, and there's so many things that are developing in front of your eyes that you don't even realize, that for some it could be a bit overwhelming. And it doesn't help that the pacing of this game's plot, at least for me, took so long for it to get going that I was very much feeling the grind. And it wasn't until the final third of the game where the game's plot throws so much exposition at you at one time that it never stops until the end of the game, and even goes past the credits, and that very much can throw you off. But I will say that the overall execution, at least for me, was very well handled. This game's plot has an impressive cast of characters throughout the game that each have their own unique purposes to play in the game itself, and each character even has their own unique chapter that is dedicated to them. And while the time spent on each character is not equal across the board, I think that each chapter for each character does do a solid enough job at leaving a lasting impression on what each of these characters has been through, and some characters even being very tragic. However, I personally did not get emotionally attached to any one of them because this game's time frame for specific characters did not give me enough time for me to become invested. Just because you throw a tragic story at me does not mean I'm going to care. Now, the game's plot is not all depressing from beginning to end, and there are certainly moments of excitement and even some oddly placed humor spread throughout. And by the end of the game's plot, it does have a rather positive message to say about the connections that we as humans have with each other and just how important they are. But overall, it ends up being a very complicated equation to what is ultimately leading to a very simple answer. And this is the problem that even me, as a big fan of Kojima, has always had a problem with his style of story. storytelling, even going throughout the entire Metal Gear Solid franchise. As much as I praise the legend himself, he does have a tendency to add story elements that do not add to the progress towards the overall message he is trying to present, but instead it feels either out of place or worse, it's just placed there to make the game longer than it needed to be. There were certainly a number of parts of this game's plot that could have been removed to make the pace of the game move much more smoother, and you still would have gotten the same result by the end. And because of that, I think that this game will appeal to a much smaller audience than some of Kojima's earlier projects. Now, the gameplay for Death Stranding is really divided into two categories, that being exploration and combat. And despite what some people might think at first glance, this game is not a glorified walking simulator. Yes, it is true that early on you will be doing a lot of walking and climbing over terrain, but as you progress you will be given multiple ways to travel to make your primary objective so much easier to deal with when you gain access to motorcycles, trucks, and even zip lines to help you get over difficult terrain. But I will not deny that 80% of your time playing Death Stranding will be spent delivering cargo from one location to another or taking part in several fetch quests that ask you to go to one location, pick something up, and bring it back. But there is a purpose to all of this in the overall story, even if it takes a while for it to be revealed. Now, once you have completed a delivery to a person, you will then be allowed to connect them to the Chiral network, and this will then give you access to all of their resources to aid you. Now, as an open world exploration game, you will be given the freedom to go just about anywhere on the map, and it is really impressive how there are very few closed off areas. Now, when delivering cargo from one location to another, it is up for you to decide how you wish to get there. And there are some locations that have multiple different paths for you to choose from, and depending on which path you choose will decide the level of difficulty that you will have to experience. When transporting your cargo, depending on your support equipment to choose from, you will then either make your transportation of this cargo easier or harder. When going up and down hills or through difficult terrains, you must manage the weight of your cargo. If it is not too much, then it is something that you will never have to worry about. But when it comes to delivering heavier deliveries, you will have to constantly shift your weight to prevent your cargo from falling off and being damaged or getting wet. And you will be graded on how you performed when delivering your cargo and what condition it was in. When delivering your cargo, you must not only take the terrain into effect, but you also must take the weather itself into effect. Depending on your location, you may encounter what is called timefall, which is a special kind of rain that ages anything that it falls on. So it is not advised to spend too much time in timefall, as it will eventually start damaging your cargo. Between deliveries, there are several bases for bridges that you can visit, and it is here that you will rest, heal up, replenish your equipment, and even without spoiling anything, gain the means to travel faster between different locations. Now, the other 20% of the gameplay is focused on combat, and there are 4 different enemy varieties. The first 2 are either groups that are called mules or groups of terrorists. Mules are groups of people who want to take your cargo, and terrorists simply want to kill you. Now, when engaging either of these groups, it is very important that you do not kill any of them, as killing anyone will cause their bodies to go what is called necro, which will ultimately cause their bodies to basically go nuclear and cause what is called a void out, creating a giant crater in the map that will make going through that particular area much harder. So I advise you not to kill anyone, as you will be given plenty of non-lethal weapons that you can use against them. The third kind of enemy that you will encounter are what I call skeletons, which you will only ever fight a small amount of times throughout the game, as these enemies can be killed using lethal force. But the fourth and most common and most dangerous enemy that you will encounter are the BTs. Now, BTs only appear in areas where you will encounter timefall, and it is during these sections that your BB will become your greatest ally. Using BB, you will visually be able to see the location of BT's locations that are around you, and you must sneak past them quietly. If the BTs begin to start hearing movement, they will start advancing towards your position, and you are advised to stop moving and hold your breath and allow the BTs to simply move around you without noticing you. And should you be detected, the BTs will attempt to drag you down into the pool of tar that appears below you, and if you're carrying cargo, it will make it that much harder to escape. And if you are unfortunately pulled down into the tar, you will then be pulled into a mini-boss area in which you will be forced to engage the physical manifestation of all of the BTs in the immediate area, and using specialized weapons that you will pick up over the course of the game, you will either have the choice to either escape the area or will be forced to have to fight them, and if you die here, it will cause a void out. Now, there are a number of unavoidable BT boss fights that are spread throughout the game, however, there aren't many of them. Now, the single most unique gameplay mechanic that is added to Death Stranding is the use of the social chiral network. When you connect a specific area to the network, you will then be able to connect to all the other players that are also connected to the same specific area. With this, you will have access to roads, vehicles, safe houses, and other elements that will make getting through that specific area much easier. And the reason that this is so important is because what you do as an individual will actually help out your fellow gamers. There are certain service structures that you can build that other players can use, and by doing this, players can help each other. And just the idea of something that I have added to the world is actually helping other players is an amazing feeling that I've never experienced in any other game before. And getting likes from people thanking me for using structures that I've added is such a great feeling as a gamer. And this carries on into the boss fights. Several times you will find yourself running low on resources, and you will see echoes of other players throwing you equipment that you can use that they have left behind to aid you. And this is really incredible. And even though you can't physically see them, just the feeling of knowing that there is someone always there to help you is a truly incredible addition to this gameplay. When it comes to the game design department, nearly everything that I saw and experienced was simply spectacular. The game's visuals, without question, make it the best looking game that has come out this year. The overall presentation that the game presents at times feels less like a game and more like a cinematic movie, which I was a big fan of. The location and attention to detail is so high quality that it feels so realistic that some of these locations could actually exist in the real world. The majority of characters' appearances resemble their actors' counterparts perfectly, and their performances from just about every character is handled masterfully, even with characters that aren't given much screen time as others. And the fact that this game was using the Decima engine, which was also used to create Horizon Zero Dawn, gives it a wonderful connection to one of my favorite new IPs that has come out during this generation of gaming, which makes this game extra special to me. And speaking of Horizon, I loved all of the little Easter eggs that appeared throughout the game, and there were even some celebrity appearances that I did not expect to see, as going into this game I wanted to do my best to avoid spoilers as best I could. There was obviously some product placement throughout the game that I felt was a bit too on the nose, but heck, that's Kojima for you. When it comes to the amount of scale that is presented in Death Stranding, it is simply incredible, made even better with the use of unique camera angles in specific locations and the inclusion of specifically chosen songs to help symbolize a specific moment in the journey, and adds to the atmosphere and overall tone of the moment that you are experiencing. Gives Death Stranding one of the most unique soundtracks that I've listened to in a while. And though I personally really enjoyed it, I think that this is going to be an aspect of the overall game that some people are going to overlook. However, despite how impressive as a game Death Stranding is from a game mechanics sense, it is not perfect, and there are indeed a number of flaws with its pacing, its storytelling, and some of its gameplay aspects not being as smooth as one would expect. But there is simply too much greatness spread throughout this entire game to stop it from being one of the most fascinating and one-of-a-kind games that I've ever experienced. Now, when it comes to Death Stranding, I have to admit that while I openly admit that throughout my entire experience of playing Death Stranding, I didn't necessarily have a lot of, how should I say, fun playing this game, but it certainly was a very interesting playthrough. And I have to admit, it was without question the most thought-provoking game that I have played all year, or I could say after a number of years. is a very thought-provoking game, and this very much shows that Hideo Kojima certainly has not lost his touch in terms of intriguing the player, because that very much did work for me. However, I do think this game deserves a lot of praise. However, I don't really think this game should deserve the level of praise that it has been receiving as of late. I certainly do not see this as a 10 out of 10 game. I certainly do not see this as a masterpiece, and I certainly, hopefully, this game does not win Game of the Year. I'm saying that now. And look, I'm a massive fan of Hideo Kojima, and I really do think that Death Stranding is a well-executed passing project. It has shown us that he has not lost his touch. This game was very well thought out, it was very well developed, and from a first-time studio like Kojima Productions, what this game does is pretty much put me in a good state of mind of showing us the type of quality of game that we should expect from a studio like this. And therefore, I'm very much invested in what this studio has for us in the future. There have been talks about whether or not they want to do a second Death Stranding game, or if Hideo Kojima would like to put his talents towards making a horror game, which I think would be an incredible direction for him to go. But as far as Death Stranding, I think the one saving grace that at least pushes this up to me, for me to consider it a bare minimum a great game, is the social Chiral network system. Because there's just too much of a grind. There's just too much of it being focused on making deliveries, and you have to wait until the end to see what it was all worth. And I think that for most people, that is just not an attractive idea for people to want to play. And I openly admit that this game is by far not for everybody. There is a good amount of people that will not enjoy this game. They want to play something that is fun, engaging, and has a much faster pace, and that is certainly not what Death Stranding is. And if you don't like this game, or if you're not interested in it, trust me, you're not wrong. There are some genuine flaws that I think a typical gamer will have a problem with, but I think that if you're someone who's looking for a much different experience, then this is worth a try. So if I had to give Death Stranding a rating, without the Chiral network social system, I would have given this game a 7 on its own. But because it has that addition, I will bump this up to an 8. So 8 out of 10 is, I believe, a good place to place Death Stranding and a good start for Kojima Productions. And I can't wait to see what they do next. So that's my review of Death Stranding. If you like this video, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe, and be sure to press the links in the description down below so you can follow me on all my social media outlets. And like always, thank you guys for watching. You're awesome, and I will see you next time.